The air in that room was too cold for July. Or maybe it was just me. My hands gripped the arms of the leather chair, nails digging into the seams. Chloe sat across from me, legs crossed, her designer purse perched beside her like royalty. She was glowing. Her lipstick was red, her dress black, and her smile, smug, as if this was already over and she'd won. Mr. Harrison, my father's longtime lawyer, cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. "Shall we begin?" Chloe gave a little nod and leaned forward eagerly, like she already knew what was coming. And maybe she did. She always said Dad would never leave me a dime. I didn't speak. I barely breathed. The will was long enough that my heart had started to calm. Chloe was named, of course she was. Properties, stocks, cars, all handed to her one after the other. She smiled bigger with every sentence. She even chuckled at one point and looked at me. "Don't look so shocked, Nora," she whispered. "This was always going to be mine." I still didn't answer. I just sat there, trying to keep my expression steady while my stomach turned. Then, something shifted. Mr. Harrison paused. He turned a page. His brow furrowed slightly, the first time he showed any real emotion all day. Then he said something I'll never forget. However, in accordance with a sealed clause written and notarized separately. Chloe stopped smiling. Mr. Harrison continued, more slowly now, as if each word weighed something heavy. "A conditional amendment has been added to the will. The full estate will not be distributed until the clause has been read aloud and its terms made clear." The room went silent, the type of silence where even the ticking wall clock seems disrespectful. Chloe blinked, then gave a nervous laugh. "What clause?" Mr. Harrison didn't answer her directly. He kept reading, and with each word that followed, I watched her face. Her expression melted, from confused to pale to furious. She gripped her chair like she was about to get up, but she didn't. Me? I just sat there. I knew the moment was coming. I'd felt it in my bones since the day I stood by Dad's hospital bed and held his hand for the last time. But even I didn't expect this. That sentence, that one sentence, flipped the entire room upside down. And it wasn't over yet. Hey viewers, what would you do if your sibling told you to your face you'd get nothing, only to be publicly humbled like this during a will reading? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget to hit like if you're ready for the next twist. People always assume siblings grow up with shared memories, shared love, and some kind of automatic bond. That wasn't true for me and Chloe. From the moment I was old enough to understand anything, I knew Chloe didn't like me. Not in that typical big sister teasing way. I mean real dislike. She looked at me like I was a bug she had to step over to get what she wanted. Chloe was 3 years older than me, and somehow that gap always made her feel like she had seniority over my entire existence. She was louder, prettier, and everyone's favorite, at least on the outside. At school, teachers loved her confidence. At home, guests marveled at how well-spoken and stylish she was, even at 12. She knew how to perform, and I was quiet, shy. I liked to read, paint, and help Dad in the garden. I stayed out of the spotlight. I didn't need attention. I just wanted peace. But Chloe hated peace. If there wasn't chaos, she created it. And most of the time, I was her target. I remember once I was maybe 7, and I drew a picture of our family for Dad's birthday. Me, Dad, Chloe, and Mom standing in front of the house. I worked on it all week, coloring each brick of the house, adding flowers around the porch. The night before his birthday, I left it on the kitchen counter for him to see in the morning. But when I came down the next day, it was gone. I found it later, torn in half and thrown in the trash under the sink. Chloe said it must have blown off the counter. But I knew. She didn't like when I got praise. She didn't like when Dad noticed me. And she definitely didn't like that he hugged me a little longer or that I actually listened to him while she rolled her eyes. After Mom died, things got worse. I was 11. Chloe was 14 and already bitter. She started acting out more, slamming doors, sneaking out, yelling at Dad. But what hurt the most wasn't her anger. It was her words. She blamed me. She said Mom was tired of being my mom, that she wouldn't have gotten so sick if she hadn't spent all her energy babying me. I cried. Dad tried to make her stop, but Chloe never really let go of that idea, that I had somehow taken something from her, that she deserved more, and I didn't deserve anything. I carried that for years, the weight of being the unwanted one, but Dad never saw me that way. In his own quiet way, he reminded me I mattered. He'd leave little notes in my lunchbox, buy me new sketchbooks, help me with science projects even when he was tired. Still, it always felt like a battle, one I didn't ask for. And as we grew older, Chloe just got better at hiding her cruelty. She'd smile in public but say the meanest things in private. She mocked my job, my clothes, my friends. She called me low maintenance like it was an insult. By the time we were both adults, we barely spoke. Only birthdays and holidays forced us into the same room. And even then, she found a way to make me feel small. Louder laugh, flashier clothes, bigger stories. I used to wonder what I did wrong, why my own sister looked at me like I didn't belong in the same family. But as I sat in that lawyer's office and remembered all of it, the childhood jabs, the torn drawing, the blame, the years of silence, I realized something. She never hated me for what I did. She hated me because she thought I was in the way of something she believed was hers. And that's why, in that moment during the will reading, when her smile started to slip, I didn't feel sorry, not even a little. Dad was diagnosed 3 years ago. I remember the moment like it just happened. The sterile hospital room, the quiet way the doctor said stage 4, and the way Dad simply nodded, like he already knew. Chloe wasn't there that day. She wasn't there the week after either, or the week after that. She sent a few text messages, then flew off to Greece with her boyfriend. I remember seeing the photos on Instagram, her holding cocktails, smiling under the sun, captioned, "Living my best life." Meanwhile, I was helping Dad up the stairs. It started slowly, just fatigue at first, then pain in his back, then weight loss. Before long, he couldn't keep food down. I left my apartment and moved back into our childhood home to take care of him full-time. I took a leave from my job. I cooked, cleaned, managed his medications, and took him to every doctor's appointment. It was exhausting. Some days I cried in the shower just to let it out in private, but I never complained, because I loved him, because he never gave up on me when everyone else did, because he needed me. Chloe came around once, maybe twice. Both times she made a big show of it, brought flowers, posed for pictures with Dad in his bed, and posted them online with captions like, "Cherish every moment." She'd stay for half an hour, then vanish again. But I stayed. Every day. And in those quiet moments, between his coughing fits and his long naps, Dad would talk. About everything. About Mom. About his regrets. About how he wished he'd kept the family closer. And most often, about Chloe. He told me, "Your sister always thought love was something you earned with noise, but you gave it in silence. That's real." I didn't know what to say. I just held his hand. One afternoon, he called me into his room. He was weaker than usual, his voice barely above a whisper. "There's something in the attic," he said. "A box. I want you to bring it to me." It was hidden behind a pile of old blankets. Dusty, heavy, a wooden box with a small brass lock. Inside were photographs, old documents, and a sealed envelope addressed to me. I didn't open it. I waited. He asked me to sit beside him and opened the letter himself. His hands trembled as he pulled the paper out. Then he looked at me, his eyes watery but sharp. "I've seen everything, Nora. Every sacrifice, every tear. And I want you to know, when I'm gone, it won't go unnoticed." He didn't explain what he meant exactly, just that things were taken care of. After that, he never mentioned the box again. But I kept it close. I didn't touch it, didn't read the letter again. I was too afraid of what it might say, or mean. I just kept doing what I was doing. waking him up, helping him walk, holding the bowl when he threw up, rubbing his back when he couldn't sleep. Every now and then, Chloe would text, "How's Dad?" I'd reply, "We're managing." She never asked if I needed anything, never offered to take a weekend or even a day, but I stopped expecting her to. Dad passed quietly one morning while I was making tea. I came back into the room and he was just still. I held his hand one last time. No cameras, no visitors. Just me, like always. And when Chloe finally arrived, 2 days later, draped in black, smelling like expensive perfume, she looked around the house like she was already deciding what furniture she'd keep. She didn't ask how I was. She asked where the will was. After Dad passed, the house felt hollow, like the walls themselves had gone quiet. I didn't rush to clean out his room. I couldn't. Every corner reminded me of him. The books on his nightstand, the half-finished crossword puzzle, the blanket I'd tucked around his legs every evening. I moved through the house like a ghost, pausing in doorways, expecting to hear his voice. But I kept circling back to that box, the same one I'd brought down from the attic when he asked, the one with the brass lock and the letter tucked inside addressed to me. I hadn't dared open it again after that night, but now he was gone, and the silence around me felt like permission. I took the box into the kitchen and sat down at the table. My hands trembled slightly as I lifted the lid. Inside were things that didn't seem important at first. Old photographs, some from before I was even born. Dad as a young man in uniform. Mom smiling on the beach in a sundress. Chloe as a baby curled up on Dad's chest. Then me, in a tiny yellow dress, missing a front tooth, laughing at something just out of frame. He'd kept all of it. Beneath the photos was the letter. Still folded, still sealed in that crisp, deliberate handwriting. To my Nora, it said on the front. I opened it. His voice came through every word. Nora, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And if I'm gone, it means I didn't get to say everything I wanted to say and not the way you deserve to hear it. So I'll try to do it here. First, thank you for everything. You gave up your own life to be with me in my final days. You did it without fanfare, without complaint. That's a kind of love money can't buy, and one your sister never understood. Chloe always believed she was owed something by being loud enough to demand it. You gave everything without asking for anything, and I saw it all. I'm not going to pretend I was a perfect father. I made mistakes. I let the distance between you two grow, and I didn't stop it the way I should have. But I want you to know, I tried to make it right in the only way I knew how. I paused and wiped my eyes. His handwriting had gotten shakier toward the end of the page, but the message was still clear. He was speaking to me, not as the man everyone knew, not as the businessman or the father of 2 girls, but as someone who had finally seen the truth. I turned the page. There is something in my official will that you should not be surprised by. I've made arrangements, specific ones. Do not let Chloe bully you. She will try. She always does. But this time, she will lose. Everything I've built, every dollar, every property, every investment, I want it to go to someone who showed me what real love looks like. Don't tell her about this letter, don't argue with her, just wait. The truth will speak for itself. At the bottom of the letter was his signature, strong, confident. I sat there, holding the paper in both hands, the edges shaking just slightly as I exhaled. He really meant it. He had seen everything. And for once, I didn't feel small or overlooked. I felt seen. I didn't know the full details yet. I didn't know what was coming. But I knew in that moment that Chloe's smug little speech at the funeral, telling me not to expect anything, wouldn't hold. There was something else, too, in the bottom of the box. A flash drive. I didn't plug it in. Not yet. Just tucked it back inside with the letter. I had no plans to gloat. I didn't even want revenge. I just wanted peace. But Chloe had made it clear. She wanted a fight. And something told me. She had no idea what was waiting for her. The morning of the funeral, the sky was a heavy gray. It hadn't started raining yet, but the air felt thick, like even the clouds were holding their breath. I wore a simple black dress and pinned Dad's old cufflink to the inside of my coat. It was the only piece of his I carried that day. I didn't need jewelry or diamonds. I had his memory. And that letter. The service was quiet and dignified. A few of Dad's old business partners showed up. Some neighbors, even a former nurse. They shook my hand, offered kind words, and told me how much they admired what I'd done for him in the end. Chloe, of course, made a grand entrance 15 minutes late. She stepped out of a luxury car in heels too high for a cemetery, wrapped in a dramatic black shawl, sunglasses covering her eyes. She hugged people like a celebrity greeting fans. She cried, loudly. I don't know if the tears were real, but the performance certainly was. She didn't look at me during the service, but as soon as the last prayer was said and people began to drift toward their cars, she made her move. She found me alone near the gravestone, placing a small photo of Dad and me beneath the flowers. It was the one where he was helping me ride a bike for the first time. I loved that photo. He looked so proud. Chloe's heels clicked behind me. I thought I'd find you here, she said softly, in that syrupy voice she used when she was pretending to care. I didn't look up. You need something? I came to make sure we're clear, she said. Now I turned to face her. Her sunglasses were still on, but I could see the sneer behind them. This estate, she continued, is mine. Dad and I had an understanding. You may have been the little nursemaid at the end, but you weren't involved in the real decisions. You don't get to walk away with anything just because you warmed his soup. I blinked, trying not to laugh at how cruel and ridiculous she sounded. You're serious, I said. She stepped closer. I'm warning you, Nora. Don't contest anything. Don't embarrass yourself. The will reading is just a formality. Dad already told me what's mine. If you try to act entitled, I'll make sure you walk away with nothing. I stared at her for a moment. She really didn't know. She didn't know about the letter. She didn't know about the box. She didn't know that Dad had spent his final months making sure I was protected, not just emotionally, but legally. And she definitely didn't know that everything she was so confidently claiming had a condition tied to it. One she had already failed. I thought about saying something, just a word. Just enough to wipe that smug look off her face. But I didn't. I stood up straight, dusted my coat, and looked her in the eye. You done? She tilted her head. Excuse me? You said what you needed to say. So, are you done? She flinched, like she hadn't expected me to stand up to her. Like she was still talking to the version of me who cried over torn drawings and stayed silent when she mocked me. I turned to walk away, but then paused. Chloe, I said over my shoulder, you might want to bring your best poker face to the will reading. You're going to need it. And then I left her there, standing in front of Dad's grave, mouth slightly open, fingers clenching the strap of her purse. For once, she didn't have the last word. By the time I arrived at the lawyer's office, Chloe was already there, perfectly posed on the leather couch like she was waiting for a photo shoot. Her black dress was fitted like armor, her makeup flawless. She glanced up as I walked in, barely acknowledging me with a raise of her brow. I said nothing. She smirked. The room was quiet except for the faint ticking of a clock and the shuffle of papers. Mr. Harrison, our father's longtime attorney, sat across from us at a dark oak desk, flipping through a thick folder. Thank you both for being here, he said formally, folding his hands. As you know, your father's last will and testament was updated 1 year before his passing. It includes both standard allocations and one final clause that must be read aloud. Chloe gave a little laugh, the kind meant to sound elegant, but landed sharp. I think we can keep it simple, she said, waving her hand. Dad and I already spoke about everything before he passed. He told me I'd be taking over the estate. I glanced at Mr. Harrison, but he didn't flinch. He simply looked down at the document and began reading. At the time of his passing, Robert Williams's total estate is valued at approximately $50 million in assets, investments, and properties. Chloe's eyes lit up like a chandelier. She crossed her legs slowly, then leaned back, a satisfied grin spreading across her face. I sat quietly, hands folded in my lap. Mr. Harrison continued listing the contents of the will. The main house in Westfield, 2 investment properties in Miami, luxury vehicles, a string of business accounts, and significant shares in his former company. Chloe barely contained her excitement. She was already nodding, likely planning what to sell and what to keep. All of the above, Mr. Harrison read, are to be distributed in accordance with the terms outlined below. Then, he paused. A long, unexpected pause. Chloe tilted her head. Is there a problem? Mr. Harrison's expression didn't change, but he did clear his throat. A small sign that something was different now. In addition to the standard provisions, your father included a sealed clause. It is legally binding, witnessed and notarized separately. It overrides all prior distributions unless the terms are met. Chloe blinked. What clause? Mr. Harrison opened a second envelope and began reading. In order for my daughter, Chloe Williams, to inherit any portion of my estate, she must have personally provided care for me for no less than 30 consecutive days during the final year of my life, without paid assistance, without delegation, and without complaint. This clause reflects my belief in not only familial duty, but sincerity of heart. If this condition is not met, the entirety of the estate is to be transferred to my daughter, Nora Williams. For a second, no one moved. Chloe's smile collapsed so fast it was like a balloon had popped. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. What is this? She finally sputtered. Mr. Harrison didn't look up. He simply laid the letter flat on the table, hands folded again. Is this a joke? Chloe's voice cracked as she stood. No one told me about this clause. I didn't sign anything. You weren't required to, Mr. Harrison replied calmly. This was a condition your father included with full legal authority. Chloe turned to me, furious now. You knew about this. I didn't say a word. I just watched her. Watched the color drain from her face. Watched her confidence disintegrate as she realized she had been so sure, so smug, so loud. And yet she had already failed. She never spent even one day caring for him. Not one. Mr. Harrison reached for the final page. Shall I continue with the transfer details? Chloe was shaking now. This isn't fair. He can't do this. I'm his daughter too. He did do this, I said quietly, and you were too busy pretending to be grieving to notice. She sat back down slowly, eyes wide, breathing heavy. And I sat still, calm. Not because I wanted her to suffer, but because for once I didn't have to prove anything. The truth had spoken for itself. Chloe didn't speak for a full minute. She just sat there, frozen, stunned, the silence around her louder than any words she could have said. The confident sister, who waltzed in with a smile, was now slumped in the same leather chair, eyes darting, breathing fast and blinking hard like she could undo everything by simply not believing it. But belief had nothing to do with it anymore. Mr. Harrison gently slid the final paper across the table toward me. This document finalizes the full transfer of assets per your father's instructions, Miss Williams. It felt surreal. Even after everything, the years of silence, the quiet loyalty, the care, the neglect from Chloe. I hadn't imagined it would come to this. Not because I didn't believe Dad meant what he wrote, but because I never expected to win. That's what Chloe had done to me over the years. Made me feel like the background character in my own life. She finally spoke, and her voice came out hollow. There has to be a way around this. You're a lawyer, aren't you? There has to be something you can do. Mr. Harrison didn't even blink. Your father made sure there wouldn't be. He was very thorough. Chloe looked at me then, no longer smug, just desperate. "You think you deserve this?" she snapped. "You think wiping his mouth and playing nurse for a few months makes you the saint of the family?" "No," I replied calmly. "But I was there, when it counted, when he was scared, when he was in pain. You were busy taking selfies in Paris." Her jaw clenched. "I didn't want this," I added. "I didn't move back home for the money. I moved back because he was my father, because he mattered, even when he was no longer powerful or sharp or easy to love. I was there because he needed someone." Chloe shook her head and laughed bitterly. "This is insane. You always played the victim, and now, look at you, taking everything like some martyr." I reached into my bag and gently pulled out the flash drive from the wooden box. I slid it across the table toward Mr. Harrison. "There's a video on this," I said. "Dad recorded it a few weeks before he passed. He said you should be the one to hear it." Chloe stared at it like it was a live bomb. Mr. Harrison plugged it into his laptop and turned the screen toward us. After a brief moment, Dad's face appeared. Thinner than I remembered, but his eyes, they were so clear. "Hi, Chloe," he began. She flinched. "I know this video will probably upset you, and maybe it should, because I spent a long time enabling your behavior, thinking time would make you grow up. But time doesn't change people. Choices do." He paused, took a slow breath. "You had a chance. I gave you one final chance to step up, to be more than my daughter in name, but you chose not to. Nora didn't just sit by my side. She sacrificed years of her life. Quietly, without expectation." He looked directly into the camera. "You always thought you were the strong one because you were loud. But real strength is love. Love when it's hard. Love when no one's watching. And that's what she gave me. That's why she's getting everything." The screen went dark. Chloe didn't say anything. She just stood up, slowly, and gathered her things. "I'll fight this," she said without looking at me. "I'll find a way." "You can try," Mr. Harrison replied, closing the folder. "But I assure you, your father made sure that this would be final." She left without saying goodbye. The door clicked shut behind her. I stayed seated for a moment, the weight of everything finally settling in. I didn't feel victorious, just full of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. As I walked out of the office, I could almost hear Dad's voice in my head, steady, warm, proud. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the forgotten daughter. I felt like the one who had been seen all along.